DARKWING Blast releases on October 21st. While it doesn't have the same major format rotating archetypes of its predecessor, Power of the Elements, this set did introduce several generically playable staples and strong support for existing decks. Here's everything you need to know. Bystial is a series of dragon monsters that all share the effect to banish a light or dark in either graveyard to special summon themselves. This is a quick effect if your opponent controls a monster. Magnemute searches any dragon during the end phase, Druis Worm pops a special summon monster when it's sent to the graveyard, and Saronir mills a Bystial monster or branded spell or trap. Oh yeah, by the way, lore. The Bystial Lubellion can be summoned from hand or graveyard by tributing a level 6 or higher dark dragon, pitches itself to search a Bystial monster, and can place a branded continuous spell or trap on the field directly from deck. The Bystial Albalos can be summoned by tributing 2 Bystials, negates the effects of all Ritual, Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, and Link monsters on the field, and if the opponent does manage to out it, it'll banish all cards from each player's extra deck until their end phase. Branded Regained puts a light or dark you've just banished on the bottom of the deck to draw a card, and when your opponent summons a monster, you can reborn a Bystial. And finally, Branded Beast can tribute a dragon monster to pop a card the opponent controls, and during the end phase can return a branded continuous spell or trap from the graveyard to the field. While independently a very strong deck, these cards have also seen success as a splash in other decks to use as DD Crows that also give you bodies and additional effects. The standard package is 2 Magnemute, which can be used to search your 1 Druis Worm, which you can link off to pop a special summon monster. Although they aren't as versatile as DD Crow, the restriction to only banishing darks and lights doesn't make as much of a difference given the current metagame in the OCG consisting of a majority of Tear Lament. As for more Bystial focused decks, the engine has seen success as part of its extended family, branded Despia, with the new trap adding an extra form of disruption to the board, which in the Nightmare scenario, where it's still legal when I release this video, is also an out to Mystic. Additionally, Bystial Dragon Link and Bystial Dragon Maid have been floating around, also making use of incidental synergies with the deck. Kashtira is a series of level 7 psychic monsters that each summon themselves if you control no monsters, search a monster spell or trap once per turn, and have an effect that triggers when they attack or when an opponent's monster effect activates. Fenrir banishes 1 card the opponent controls face down, Unicorn banishes a card from the opponent's extra deck face down, and Ogre checks the top 5 cards of their deck and banishes one of those cards face down. Shangri-La summons a Kashtira from deck during the standby phase and locks an opponent's zone each time one of their cards is banished. Birth lets you normal summon a level 7 without tributing, summon a Kashtira from grave or banished, and if your opponent activates a spell card, you can banish 3 cards from your opponent's graveyard face down. And Preparation summons a Kashtira from hand or banished once per turn, and if your opponent activates a trap, you can banish a card from your opponent's hand face down. The deck has yet to see much play in the OCG, but what has seen play is Fenrir Exactly, being a free special summon that serves as both removal for going second and disruption for going first while searching another copy of itself for next turn, has given the card the unique title of Pankratops 2. As a pure deck, it's got some very interesting potential. Shangri-La and Preparations are strong tools for maintaining board presence, and the main deck monsters serve as very powerful interruptions, but the real reason to start getting interested in the deck is for the upcoming support in Photon Hypernova, giving them much more consistency, a much stronger end boss, and potential to completely lock your opponent out of the game with Shangri-La's zone locking. More on that later. Bye, Diablosis. Alright, I was going to talk about the new Blackwings here, but in the first draft of the script, this segment was the longest by a margin of over 100 words, so we're breaking it down. Search, summon, token, place new spell, effect, veiler, synchro with material from deck, summon from deck, mill, quick effect, board wipe, summon from grave, spell, trap, negate, shuffle back, banish to synchro, summon. This support does quite a bit for Blackwings, giving the deck some much-needed modernization with more starters and a better end board that can include both Blackwinged Assault Dragon and Full Armor Master, which will be protected from Assault Dragon's field wipe effect. Vada is an incredibly powerful combo piece that can get your dragon in rotation while also dumping useful cards to the graveyard like Zephyros. Su3 is a great search card, mostly because they printed it alongside like 4 good things to search with it, and because it isn't once per turn, so if you get an extra normal summon like with No Thung, you can get multiple searches with it. And Twin Shadow pairs especially well with Assault Dragon by letting you shuffle back the very same materials you banished to get 2 monsters for the price of 1. So, good job on this one, I guess. How are we doing on the last set's cover archetype? Any broken instant contact yet? Come on, guys. I'm summoning a 7 with it. Kashtira's gonna go crazy. Speaking of poke cards y'all still haven't broken yet, there's more Vernacifs. Misting Seedlings has the same discard to reborn effect as the monsters from the first wave, but for its bonus effect, it searches any Earth Fairy monster. We're gonna circle back to that. Vera the Vernacif goddess has a... Continuous effect that can negate a monster effect once per turn during resolution without activating. Why do they keep making this type of effect? It's just a headache for new players to learn and for veterans to explain. I don't get it. Also, during your turn, it can take control of an opponent's monster and make it Earth, and during your opponent's turn, it can summon an Earth monster from graveyard. Full Bloom is a field spell that can banish flower buds from your hand or graveyard to summon Vera from deck, and if a Vernacif is summoned from the graveyard, you can bounce a monster from the field or graveyard to hand. These cards help Vernacifs on two fronts. Seedlings adding extra consistency to the archetype, meanwhile Vera and Bloom give the deck what it was really missing, an archetypal payoff. Up till now, Vernacif has always seemed strong in theory, but was mostly just an idea for an engine in existing Earth decks instead of an actual deck, and in practice it pretty much only ever appeared on twitch.tv/peepsYGO, losing to Sprite and Tier. Now with Vera and Bloom, the deck can set up a bounce and a negate all in archetype, which is, something. Regardless, the deck still only saw success in the OCG as an engine in decks like Emancipator, which I would put on screen, but the thing is they have Block Dragon and Grass, and to be honest, I just don't think there's anything we in the States can learn from it. What I do think we should talk about, though, is new Naturias. To start, we've got Mole Cricket, which contribute itself as a quick effect to summon a Naturia from deck, or 2 if your opponent controls the monster with the highest attack. Camellia mills a Naturia on summon, revives a Naturia when your opponent summons a monster, and can replace a Naturia monster effect's cost that tributes monsters by sending the top 2 cards of the deck to the graveyard instead. Yeah, don't look at that one over there, that card sucks. So this deck topped. I know it's weird, I didn't expect that either, but it is interesting to consider the many factors that went into this Cinderella story of a list. So first of all, these 2 new cards add a lot of power to Naturias, which, did you know, have some really good main deck monsters, like Sunflower and Vayne, non-once-per-turn negates that were held back by being difficult to get on board consistently, and the steep cost of having to tribute 2 monsters. Mole Cricket and Camellia address both problems, making it easy to spam out your Naturias, and giving you the ability to use them multiple times by bypassing the requirement to tribute themselves. They also paired well with the Ishizu cards, let me know when we come up with a better name for this deck, mostly due to Naturia's trap card Sacred Tree, which searches a Naturia whenever it's sent to the graveyard. Getting lucky and hitting a few Sacred Tree as well as some Naturias to reborn with Camellia can get you far ahead super early into the game. And while you might ask what advantage that provides over a Shizu tier, keep in mind this was going into a meta where most, if not all decks, had adopted the Bystial engine. Those looking for a home for their Ishizu cards that wouldn't get sniped by Bystials could look towards non-light or dark strategies for mill payoffs. And this brings us back to Vernacif, as this deck also makes use of Misting Seedlings having the ability to search Ishizu cards, as well as trigger Ishizu cards by discarding them and reborn your Naturias you milled, all at the low cost of an Earthlock. Anyway, I guess this is as good a time as any to talk about Tier. I didn't make a ban list reaction video because the ban list dropped in the middle of my first day at work, but long story short, they pretty much didn't hit Tier, made Sprite reevaluate its life choices, and left us in a meta game where Tier is the clear best deck right before printing more support for it. Where have I seen this before? Rule Kalos is a fusion of Kit Kalos and any Tier monster that can negate a card or effect that performs a special summon, then pitch a Tier from hand or field. Also, if it's sent to the graveyard by a card effect, it just comes right back. Scream is a continuous spell that mills 3 when a monster is summoned and searches a Tier trap when it's sent to the graveyard, and Heartbeat shuffles a back row into the deck, or 2 if you control Vsauce, then sends a card from hand to graveyard. Needless to say, these cards add a lot to Tier's options, although Solemn Warning isn't the strongest form of interruption in the game. Given how trivially easy Rule is to set up, this card is a great addition to Tier's options. Also, it has 2500 defense, making it a branded and high spirits target, relevant not only for branded variants of the deck, but also for the small high spirits engine that's been experimented with in the TCG using D3S Frog as the mill target. Rest in peace to the anti-rotation army's strongest soldier, may you never tap again. Scream also has seen a lot of play in OCG tier lists as a very easy way to get a few extra mills, and to search Tier's extremely strong trap cards. Tier went into Dabble already the best deck in the OCG format, and has stayed that way ever since. In TCG, the same is likely true, but it's hard to say in what way exactly, given the fact that Tier has developed in a completely different way in our format. The OCG has Ishizu cards, we use Dangers and Curious instead. It's always hard to tell what OCG lists can teach us about the future of the TCG, but this is a uniquely difficult one. By the way, hey look, and out to Floodgates, better draw it. And of course, where there's new additions to the Vsauce deck, so too are there new cards for the Albaz deck. Sprite Sprint is a Link 2 with the same materials as Elf that mills any level 2 on summon, and if another monster is special summoned, you can detach material from a monster you control to bounce a monster on field to hand. Double Cross is a trap card that targets a monster on field or in graveyard, and loosely translated from problem-solving card text, either puts it on your field or attaches it to your Xyz monster. There, not that complicated. Sprint is really cool conceptually, being able to mill 2s like Nimble Angler to summon 2 Beavers, an engine which was already experimented with in the OCG as a counter to a Shizu mill, and in TCG as a discard with Fateful Adventure in the Adventurer build. It also pairs with Elf to summon any level 2 from deck without locking you into level 2s, enabling Sprite to interact with cards like Cyberstein. However, this wasn't quite enough to push Sprite back into full contention against Tier, in part because Sprint is also fucking Tier support! By making Sprint, you're able to send Merly from deck to graveyard and trigger a fusion summon, meaning Sprint is pretty much just as good in Tier as it is in Sprite. But just like with Tier, Sprite in the TCG looks very different going into Dabble. The OCG lost Toad, making Sprite's strongest endboard unattainable, but all we lost in the TCG was Ronin Totem, meaning Sprites still have access to Omni Negates. The Ronin Totem ban eats into consistency, something Sprite prides itself on, but the point remains that the deck is in a very different spot than it was at this point in the OCG, and what that means for its future with the new support remains in question. Oh, I remember how I alluded to the Adventurer engine a minute ago? Yeah, Konami wants you to stop doing that because there's 2 new adventure cards and they both lock you into Adventurer token monsters. Tessia reveals a card that mentions Adventurer token from hand to search a spell that mentions Adventurer token, except for a normal spell. And Curse of Aramatir is a continuous spell that summons an Adventurer token to either field, then discards a card. Also, if a monster you control is destroyed, you can summon yet another Adventurer token. Obviously, the summon lock kills any chance of these cards being used as part of the engine, but they are quite strong in the definitely real, not at all made up, pure adventure deck, giving you more consistency and more access to the token. And most interestingly of all, this is the first card aside from Rite of Aramesir that actually summons the token. If Konami wants to pivot towards Aramatir for token generation, that could signal the potential for an Aramesir ban in the future. If Pure Adventure no longer requires Aramesir just to exist, Konami has the option to squash the engine without making the archetype completely unusable. For hires, don't click out of the video, stop that, come back here right now, this is important. Rex Freight for Hire is pretty much word for word, bar for bar, exactly what For Hire needed. When it's summoned, you get to search a spell or trap for hire and can banish itself from the graveyard as a quick effect to add back a card for hire or summon a monster for hire from the graveyard. The first effect can search Rookie for Hire, which can tribute Rex to summon Beat, effectively giving you 3 extra copies of the best starter in the deck. 6 if you choose to play Fossil Dig, as Rex is a dinosaur. If that's not what you need, Mayhem for Hire is a quick play reborn, meaning it functions as both an extender and a way to trigger Fur Hires on the opponent's turn. But that might not be necessary, as Rex accomplishes the same thing with its graveyard effect, giving you the ability to trigger Fur Hires like Dampa, which pops face-up cards, and Rafal, which is like a janky Prosperity with a monster negate attached. This will also help to enable Folgo, and as we all know, everybody gangsta till the Folgo hit the board. Also, being a level 2 makes it play very well with Sprites, letting you use Gigantic and Elf as part of your combo setups. They also got Donner Dagger for Hire, a link 2 that can destroy a monster for hire you control and 1 monster your opponent controls, and contribute a monster to summon a monster for hire from graveyard, or 2 if you tributed a link monster. In addition to Fur Hire, this card saw play in the OCG as a form of removal in Sprite. Not a lot of link 2s with materials this generic can unconditionally pop a monster, so if you need to deal with a threat on board, Donner is pretty good. Ignis Phoenix the Draco Slayer is a Fire Warrior Pendulum monster with a scale effect that shuffles a monster from your face-up extra deck into the main deck to search an Ignite or Draco Slayer monster. Its monster effect triggers when it's destroyed on the field and summons a Draco Slayer or Ignite from deck as a tuner. Majesty Pegasus can add a Draco Slayer from deck to hand, then destroy the card in your other Pendulum zone, and when it's Pendulum summoned or summoned by a Draco Slayer's effect, you can search for any field spell. Japan is going to keep printing this line of text on cards until the silly Americans deal with the field spell problem. Dynamite Powerload can summon a Draco Slayer or Dino Mist from your other pen zone, and if it's tributed, you can add a different Draco Slayer or Dino Mist from your face-up extra to your hand. Dragonic Pendulum can pop a card on the field when a Draco Slayer activates its effect, and when it's destroyed, you can search or summon a Draco Slayer or Drake Overlord from deck. I wonder how they intend for you to pop it. These are some really great pieces of support for existing Pendulum archetypes, including but not limited to the ones they're designed for. Ignite particularly gets a lot out of this support since all of them, as well as Durandal, are able to search Ignis. The deck saw a fair amount of success in the OCG by exploiting the ability to loop the soft once per turn effects of cards like Ignister Prominence and Electromite. Now, we've had Ignister back at 3 for over a year now, but I can't shake the feeling that there's part of this deck we're missing. Okay, we won't run this bit again, and yeah, Electromite is still banned here, and even though a lot of people thought maybe it might be unbanned to help sell the new Draco Slayers, because I wrote this part of the script after the ban list dropped, I can confidently say, dumb fuck. Really don't know what to say about the new ninjas. Ninja's one of those archetypes where they kind of pivot the main focus every time they drop more support, and this time they're returning to the deck's roots as a flip deck. You got a guy that summons them face down, a level 2 insect that negates monster effects by flipping up a face down ninja you control, and a new fusion that summons from deck face down. Now, I asked my mods what to say about these cards, and they had a lot of ideas to share with me, but none of them really inspired me. I mean, how many times in this video alone have I said something along the lines of, this new support boosts the consistency and ceiling of this deck? It's not exactly new ground for this show. So I decided what I'm going to share with you today is something much more personal to me. I think there's a conspiracy going on. These ninja cards, and the new Prediction Princesses, are part of a long line of flip support, all of which has built up a base of easy ways to summon and flip up flip monsters. Meaning, we are approaching a tipping point at which a single, amalgamated flip combo deck will appear. What are you hiding from us, Konami? Why are you building Flip Link? The Crawler Ghost Trick combo was an inside job! Also, the equip spell banishes a ninja from the graveyard to destroy any card on the field, and when it's destroyed, you summon a banished ninja. They did the same bit again. They did this twice in the same set. World Sea Dragon Zealantis is a Link 4 that only requires one or more monsters as material, and can banish all monsters on the field, then special summon them all back to the field in any battle position, including face down. Yeah, there's also some nerdy-ass battle phase effect that we won't be talking about. This card is kind of wild. First of all, a Link 4 that can be made just by linking off another Link 4 is unprecedented. Now you can trade in a Saryuja or an Apollo with no negates left for a full board reset. And that board reset is great not only for board breaking, but also as part of a means of resetting the non-once per turn effects of your monsters on the field. This is part of what made the Draco Slayer deck tick by giving them the ability to use Ignister Prominence and Electromite more times than you can count on one hand. And it's also part of how the Ninja Discord figured out how to resolve Hanzo like 40 times. I wish them the best of luck, but when the Tindangle Overlords seize their combos in the Great Flippening, all the searches in the world won't save them. Hey, what's up with Goty? Is it good yet? Igzeep summons itself if a fish is banished, something about trap cards. Snopio summons itself as a quick effect, and when it's summoned, target a monster and banish it when it leaves the field. Okay, not quite. Zet banishes itself to banish a fish from grave, comes back if it's banished during the opponent's turn, and quick sinks. Okay. Arion Post banishes a fish from graveyard to search another fish. Okay, that's cool. And Guoglim, damage step. Okay, skip that part. Banishes card that. Okay, this one doesn't do anything. Goty Cosmos can summon a fish synchro for completely free if you have 8 or more banished fish, which, I'm gonna be honest, sounds to me like free ice cream for bald men named Jeff, who used to be the CEO of Amazon. And Fury can temporarily banish a fish and an opponent's monster. Wow. Another frustrating wave of support that doesn't really address the shortcomings of the deck. I guess there's more names now, which is somewhere far below the bare minimum. There's more in-house interactions, Snopios being decently disruptive to some types of effects, and Fury being a good search target for Enoch. Arianpos is good for setting up turn 1, and yeah, I don't think I have much else to say. It's just still not good enough to compete with everything else going on in the format, or enough to compensate for all the incidental L's the deck took on the recent ban list. Once again, the TCG gives us a promising exclusive archetype, followed by a second wave that completely misses the mark on what the deck needed, and the whole thing falls off the map by next format. 7 out of 10, better than Warrock. The Amazonesses were imported in this set. This concludes the Amazonas portion of the video. Lady Labyrinth of the Silver Castle cannot be targeted or destroyed while you control a set card, can summon itself as a quick effect during the turn a Labyrinth card or normal trap was activated, and when a normal trap is activated, it can set another normal trap from deck. This card adds a lot to Labyrinth's game plan, being a much stickier body to keep around on the field that grinds out games like crazy by constantly keeping the trap cards coming. It also has this weird quirk that not a lot of Labyrinth cards have. You see, it's actually okay to draw it. Valance Awakening solo activation places a Valance from deck into your Pendulum Zone, and if a card is in the field zone, you can banish it from the graveyard to move your Valance monster to an adjacent zone. So I guess this is how you would make support for this deck. Just give it a Rhoda that's basically E-Telly that still plays around Ash somehow, and have it give you an extra move. I guess that probably cleans up some combo lines pretty well. Unfortunately, the Valance stands in my comment section have yet to produce these Valance combos they claim to have seen, so we'll never know if I'm really an idiot that has no idea what I'm talking about. They made another Runic Fusion. Don't really do anything. I guess I just wanted to mention how around this point in time, Runic just unrelatedly started seeing more success in the OCG. Very often not even playing the new card. I guess just experimenting with new Sprite variants and Sprite adjacent decks after Toad died. If that's the case, then given the similarly volatile metagame we find ourselves in, we might see the same Runic resurgence. And actually, it might be even worse because we still have Let's rattle off a few fun ones to calm me down.
Soul Scissors! They're gonna clip your soul, you dumb piece of shit!
Soul Scissors summons itself out of the graveyard when a monster on the field is destroyed, and when it's summoned from the graveyard, you can pop a monster your opponent controls. Not a lot to say about it other than it being a level 2 that you can summon with Gigantic Sprite and then link off for Sprite Elf, which can then summon it during your opponent's turn for a pop, making it the 3rd or 4th best trigger effect pop that can be enabled by Sprite Elf. But what if I told you that this one was from a video game that's older than LOB? Eh? Infernal Queen Salmon is a level 5 fish that summons a fish normal monster from deck when it's normal or special summoned, and if it's destroyed by an opponent's card, it summons any number of Vilepawns Salmon tokens. This card is simply a delight, and more than anything, kinda just shows that Konami is listening. They know we obsessed over Terra King Salmon and pretended it was the second coming of Christ. They have eyes everywhere. So shout out to Skyhawk for keeping the dream alive, shout out to Mambo for being summonable from deck again, shout out to Chess Archfiends, the real ones keep you in our hearts every day, looking forward to Dark Bishop Salmon. Also, this reminds me, did you know that there's a shark in Fort Myers, Florida? Wallow, founder of the Drudge Dragons, is a rank 6 that can detach 1 material to shuffle a card from your opponent's graveyard into the deck, or 2 materials to summon a monster from their graveyard to your field, or set a spell or trap card from their graveyard to your field. Being a rank 6 means it pairs well with Bystials, and as such has topped frequently in lists running larger Bystial packages. Like that archetype, Wallow puts in a lot of work as targeted hate for the tier matchup by shuffling away or stealing the monsters your opponent will try to fuse with. Also, it has an effect to gain attack based on how many cards are in your opponent's graveyard, which against a deep mill deck like tier can get out of hand fast. Myriad Aggregator is a rank 9 that sends a monster from extra deck to the graveyard on summon, can detach any number of its materials to attach the same number of monsters from your graveyard to it in their place, and when it's sent from anywhere to the graveyard, you can target a card on the field and negate it for the turn. Although there's been some ideas of what can be done with this card, so far none of them have really stuck. The first effect can be used to set up a Shadow Schism for a window play, but there's so many other ways to do that that are far easier than making a rank 9. Detaching materials for effect has historically been useful for triggering effects, but none that really apply to the level 9 pool. The last effect has had the most discussion surrounding it though, as it completes the tetralogy of good sends with Ultimate Slayer. We now have Natis for fusions, Trouble Sunny for links, Herald for synchros, and Aggregator for Xyz. This is actually quite important, as one of the reasons Ultimate Slayer didn't do so well in the TCG was because there wasn't really a very high value send for when you wanted to target Totally Awesome. Doubtful that alone will salvage the card's playability, but it's nice to have for when we enter a better format for the card.
Muckrake from the Underworld is a generic Link 2 that can protect a monster you control from being destroyed by tributing a fiend instead, and can, for effect, discard a card to summon a fiend from graveyard.
This card is obviously meant to work with the Dark World archetype, which is getting support in December with the new structure deck, but that's not for a while, so let's talk about its frankly bizarre other use in the OCG. You see, at some point they started playing Raigeki again. I don't know when and I don't know why, but when they realized that board breakers were good this format, OCG said in unison, ah yes, board breakers such as Raigeki. So what people are doing to play around that is using Masquerena in response to Raigeki to make Muckraker, which will be indestructible and therefore can serve as the replacement to protect your Sprite Red from being destroyed. Okay, and just like that, I'm mad again. Sima Archfiends is a trap card that blocks both players from summoning any monsters of the same card type as the monsters they already control for the rest of the turn. It's the D-Barrier Linkarada. The important difference, of course, is that this card allows your opponent to do at least one extra deck summon before they're locked out, and even then, if they can get that monster off the field somehow, they're free to summon another monster of that type. So if your opponent can get a good enough amount of value out of a single extra deck summon like a Chi-Xiao, or is capable of moving their different extra deck types off the board at the right times, like linking off Gigantic Sprite for Sprite Elf so you're free to make Toad, Simul might not be the best play. Destructive Daruma Karma Cannon flips all monsters on the field face down, then if anything remains face up, its owner must send it to the graveyard. Where last set introduced copies 4, 5, and 6 of Solemn Strike, Dabble gives us 2022's take on Torrential, clearing anything on the board by flipping down most of your opponent's monsters and killing all of your opponent's link monsters, as well as any monsters that are unaffected by Karma Cannon because of the particular "they must send" wording similar to Evenly Matched. This card adds a unique form of removal to trap-focused decks that otherwise might have struggled against Towers monsters or cards with floating effects. Finally, a TCG exclusive takes a W. 7 out of 10 doesn't beat tier. Ecclesia's fucking dead or something! Blazing Cartesia can be special summoned from your hand if Albaz is on your field or in grave, has a quick effect to fusion summon, and returns to hand during the end phase if a fusion monster was sent to the graveyard this turn. This card has a lot of potential as a portion of Branded Despia, being both a great light target for Branded Fusion and a good search off of Branded Lost. Despite all of this, with Branded waning in the TCG metagame, this card might not end up seeing play in— oh my god, Pack has read the card! I repeat, Pack has read the card! This is not a drill! Red alert! Red alert!
Laughing Blossom, what's that?
Thank you for stopping by. This has been everything you need to know. I assume all of this information will be outdated by November when someone breaks turbo-tainted Hot Rod GT. I apologize if I failed to cover your favorite card in the set. It will happen again.